How's it going, guys? Kyle Brotherson here. You are listening to the Dirt Bike Channel podcast. Thanks for joining us. As I told you before, I want to bring a lot of different content to this platform with a lot of different people in the industry. Some of the time it's just going to be me droning on, and other times I'm going to have on special guests. Today is no exception. I'm going to bring on a very special guest, actually somebody that you may not have heard of in the industry because you're a man, and this is a woman in our industry just coming in and tearing it up. I want to talk today with Kelly McCaughey, and so we're going to jump out onto the phones and try to get her in here, and I'll introduce her. Let's see if we can get her on the phone.
Hello?
Hey, Kelly, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. And this connection sounds to be a ton better, so let's use that.
Okay, great.
For the rest of you guys out there in podcast land, you don't know that this is our third try on this. So couldn't get the phone connections to work, but I think we've got a much better connection this time. So this is Kelly McCaughey. Now, we have done this intro already 2 times, but I'm going to do it a third time, and we're going to pretend like it's the first time we've ever done this. And it's going to be awesome, I know. And Kelly's going to be even better than... See, I fumbled through it the first couple of times, but essentially... This is Kelly McCaughey. She is the creator and inventor and curator and all things awesome of this over and out moto event. This is a camping / enduro / dual sport riding event where you can also do lessons too. But here's the twist on it. It's for women only. And I think this is so awesome because this is something that we're missing in our sport. I feel like there's so many women out there that are intimidated by dirt bikes, and Kelly is trying to change that. We're going to talk a lot about what she's doing. Again, she just completed earlier this summer her second annual over and out event for women. And then upcoming this weekend, there's like three days until this goes. It's her over and out Moto X or motocross, right? So
Yep.
Kelly,
Yep.
what do you have coming up this week in Stockton, New Jersey? Maybe just give us a Cliff Notes version of this thing. We'll get into it more, but tell us what you're trying to accomplish with it.
Yeah, so, well, like you said, I've completed 2 events so far, and this is the 3rd event, and this one is like an offshoot, a little bit different from the other ones. It's on a little bit smaller piece of property, but it has a motocross track, and it has a professionally built track that is like friendly for all levels. And so I thought it would be the perfect place to open up to just the women so that they could, give it a try. I mean, even we have some great riders, like woods riders and stuff like that, but some of them have never been on a motocross track. So I thought this is just a great way to get them acquainted, and to kind of make more of like a technique training camp out of it. So that's coming up in just literally like 3.5 days. So I'm excited for that. It's gonna be great.
Yeah, that sounds amazing. I hope that more people around the country start to kind of follow in your footsteps on this. Just to give you a little bit of extra background on Kelly, she does marketing and graphic design work. She's big into fitness. She's a psychology buff. She's got a bachelor's degree in evolutionary anthropology. And yes, I did say that. I challenge anyone out there to say that 5 times fast. I'm not going to do it right now. But it's evolutionary anthropology. See, I even messed it up the second time through. You've also been featured on Supercrosslive's Makeup to Mud series. That was in 2019. They did a little spotlight on you. I believe that aired actually when we were in Arlington, right? Wasn't that the Arlington?
It aired during. Yep, absolutely. And actually, I saw you posting. I think you took a picture of the screen. Yeah, we were in Arlington, and that was in February of this year.
Yeah, you weren't actually down at the event, were you? Or in Arlington? You were?
No, I couldn't make it, but I heard it was like the largest jumbo screen on the planet. So I was like, maybe I'll get a good view through the TV from that giant screen.
Yeah,
amazing.
Yeah, because we were there in Jerry World where the Cowboys play, right? So it was pretty cool. And that's then awesome. Also, right now you're riding a Beta. Is it 2019 200RR?
Yes.
Awesome. So, it's funny because I'm going to be able to get that bike. Beta is sending me a 200RR to do some testing on. I think it's sitting at a dealership just waiting for me to go swap it out right now. So I'm going to have the 2020 version of your bike, which should be pretty fun. So I may have to reach out to you for some setup tips on that.
Yeah,
software.
I'm excited to hear what you have to say about it too, for sure.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a fun bike. I'm excited for it. I like the 250s and the 300s, historically, but I love the smaller displacement bikes too. They have this little extra flavor, and some things that you just don't get in the bigger displacement bikes. So.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, I don't know what that's like being like 120 pounds. I'm feeling like that 200 for me is it's something that I had to get a little bit used to. But I know when I loan it to my guy friends that I ride with, because they were curious about it, and they are used to the 200 and up, 300 race bikes, and to watch them ride it, and they come back and say, "Woohoo! This bike is fun." I'm like, okay, good. I feel like it's a great all around bike.
Yeah. What were you riding before that? Wasn't it like a Honda 150 or something?
Yeah. I was on a CRF 150F for a couple of years.
Okay. Go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead.
Keep going.
And before that, I was just on my first bike ever, which is a teeny tiny little XR 100R was really what I started on. But I rode that bike until it felt like it was going to fall apart, and I was like, okay, kind of move up. But I moved up a little bit slowly. But well, I shouldn't say that. I spent a good amount of time on each of the bikes that I moved up on. And I learned a lot on those before I was ready for the full size.
Yeah. So how did you get started with this? Was it something that your husband did, or tell us a little bit about how that kind of what that looked like getting started in dirt bikes?
Yeah, I always wanted to ride, but I never really, I guess the opportunity didn't really present itself to me until after, after childhood. For some reason growing up, I just never got into riding, and I wish that I had, because I used to do a lot in the woods. I used to ride a mountain bike in the woods, and I loved it. Just for some reason, no one around me rode dirt bikes really. It just wasn't like a thing. And then I wanted to get a motorcycle when I was in my late 20s and living more in the city. I got rid of my car, and I thought, okay, a motorcycle would be a great way to get around. And so when I met my now husband, I was already registered to take the motorcycle class. And when I met him, I had no idea, of his background at all. But it turned out that he grew up riding and racing with his friends. So,
nice.
He started riding when he was about 5 years old, and never stopped. And so all of his friends are, woods riders, motocross riders. And so a friend of his had this XR 100R in his garage, great condition, and said, oh, well, we'll set her up. And they took me out into a field and gave me the general run through, and I rode it. And it was funny because on the way there, I said, I feel like I'm already going to know how to do this. It wasn't intimidating or scary to me just because I wanted to do it so badly. And sure enough, just learning the basic gears and going around a field, that part was cake. That I was shifting up and down and, riding around it looked like I wasn't even a beginner that first day. And then I think they got bored of watching me, honestly, and said, well, let's take her on a little jaunt through the woods. So they hopped on an ATV, a four-wheeler, and led me through one of their woods trails. And that, of course, was just totally different, just going on a trail that looks like a hiking trail and crossing over roots and logs, and then having a little trouble with the bike, stalling out, having to get it started again, all of that little troubleshooting. And as I got through it, it felt amazing. And I thought, well, where has this been all my life? So that started it. And that was probably 8 years ago. Yeah. And it hasn't stopped since then.
Yeah, I love it. It's funny because when we first talked about a year ago, you were kind of in this process of trying to figure out what the next bike was going to be. And so you reached out to me and, over email, and then we ended up having a phone conversation. And I just felt like at the time I could relate to your story so much, even as a man. And it really got me thinking about how many more women there are out there that could be doing this sport and could be finding a ton of fulfillment from it, but they're just too scared because they think it's maybe a man's sport, or they're scared because the bikes are heavy or because the bikes are loud or something like this. And I've been noodling on it ever since that conversation and wondering, if there's something that I could be doing to kind of lessen that intimidation factor for a lot of women. But you're in a better position to do that than I am just because you are a woman. And so I've been following casually these events that you've been putting on and thinking this is just awesome. So kind of, and I want to talk about the events a little bit more, but before we get into that, what do you think, what dirt bikes make a good starter bike for women? And then after we talk about the starter bikes, I want to talk about maybe what's the next bike that a woman should look at? Because you're going to have a unique perspective that I don't have. So, what do you think are some of the good starter bikes for women? Where should they be looking?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I tend to base a lot of my answers off of my own experience, which I know is not everyone, and not everyone's just like me and whatever. But I mean, I feel pretty confident in what I went through and what I saw, and it wasn't like I didn't consider anything or didn't try different things. So, I mean, for me, the smaller 4-stroke bikes were great. Like I said, I had that XR 100. It was a kickstart only, and it sounds like, if you look at it, it's to the average girl, I think it seems like a baby bike or a a bike that doesn't do a whole lot or isn't super big. But when we started riding more serious off-road terrain, I mean, we started going out to Pennsylvania, and it's very technical, or upstate New York. It's some of the hardest stuff in the country. It's tricky terrain. There's nothing to sneeze at. But even, so being on a small bike like that, I learned that they can do a lot. So there's just a lot that those small bikes can do. And I'm sure there are a ton of men out there maybe listening to this who are nodding along saying, yeah, like I could hop on an XR100 and have a blast, and I could, take it up a trail. And, one thing I think is like women definitely shouldn't overlook some of these smaller bikes. I think what makes it hard is that the body of the bikes are a little smaller because they're made for smaller, kids or younger people. So you feel a little oversized on them sometimes. But for me, what felt like challenges in that way became assets, because I used to complain about, like, I would just feel like the bike is a little too small, or I feel like I'm, I'm not balanced, or, something or other. But there was still so much I had to learn that every guy that I rode with said, I could do it on that bike, or my son can do it, and he's about your size, so it's kind of like there's no room to complain, just learn to ride it.
Yeah.
And I'm glad I got pushed to do that, because there was so much I had to learn, to the point that my body really adjusted to all of it. So the core strength and the balance I got, and, I do a lot, standing, like you really should in the woods. And it's not something a lot of people are comfortable with either, but I'm more comfortable with that now. So I really just think riding a smaller bike like that just set me up to have so much better skill in the long run. And like I said, I rode it until I started to kind of beat the bike up too much. And some of the guys who are working on my bike, mechanic friends of ours, when they start to suggest, like, okay, you probably need to be on a bigger bike, or people who rode with me said, you need a bigger bike. I was like, okay, I think it's time. And you start to feel that approach. And then I moved up to a CRF 150F. So that gave me a little more height, just a little more power, but it still had the small wheels. And mine with fresh tires and good handlebars and everything. It was a really good setup for my size. So just on my tippy toes.
How tall are you, Kelly?
I'm like 5'6", 5'7",
Okay.
5'6.5".
Okay. Cool.
And and some people, I've gotten on some 150s that for some reason seem to be lower. I think it's just maybe how they're ridden or how they broke in. Mine was great, and with fresh tires, like I said, right on the tippy toes, it was a great step for me, and a really awesome bike. And from what I heard, those bikes are actually kind of hard to find because people hold on to them for so long, because they're the perfect size for kids, but they're also a great size for intermediate, and they're so fun that a lot of adults just hold on to them. So I searched for a while and found a pre-owned one for myself. And it was great. And then that one I rode for a couple of years, and same story. I think it may have looked like I was on a smaller bike compared to some other people, but I could ride stuff just as well, if not better, than other people. And it gave me the stability to do that. And it gave me the confidence also to start going on some trips or doing some races and some events where I knew I could count on that bike. I did the Northeast 24-hour race on that bike in the middle of the night with just one light on my helmet, and it was great. I tractored up. We had thunderstorms. It was super muddy. Everybody, all the, men are just slipping and sliding, trying to get up these hills. And I just went, I tractored up it. But the beauty of it is, I was safe. I was able to get through it. There were still challenges for me. so it's great. It's great to have a bike like that teaches you a lot while not being too much for you.
Yeah, and I think that's a big part of it is it's not intimidating. You need to find a bike that you feel comfortable on, and I think for a lot of women and a lot of people just starting out in general, they want to be able to put both feet down. And on those bikes that are a little bit lower seat height, that means a lot for you to be able, because I've got a CRF 125F here. It's the big wheel version of it for my daughter. And she likes it because the seat height is low enough that she can touch the ground. And my wife hasn't started riding it yet because she's always chasing a 2-year-old around at this point. But I think it's a bike that she will be comfortable in riding because it's not loud and the seat height is a little bit lower. And that's what I love about how your progression happened. I think it's too many women get into this sport where maybe their husband or their boyfriend or just they got the wrong bike even on their own means, and then it was intimidating. And if it's intimidating before you've really gotten that, the bug, bitten by the bug, you're never going to get bitten by that, if that makes sense. And
absolutely. So, and not to sidetrack from the you asked me, okay, what are some good starter bikes? I said the smaller 4-strokes, and obviously that's TTR 125s. Kawasaki has the KLX 140. The Honda, like I said, I've had 2 Hondas. The first bike I ever rode was a TTR 125. And when I went back to my Honda, when that TTR wasn't available, I was nervous about it because it wasn't a 125, it was a 100. And at that point I was like, oh gosh, how is this going to do? It was great. I had so much fun on that. So I think it's also different bikes connect with different people in different ways. So for me, that Honda, the power delivery, somehow it just connected with me and it felt better. And I think everybody's different. And the other thing is, I don't always talk about it being a fear factor thing. So yeah, there's definitely intimidation, but I think that could go away really, really quickly when you just take the intimidation factor away. So I like to kind of ignore the concept of intimidation or being scared. I mean, I don't ignore it. If someone's intimidated, I give them the information they need to not be intimidated. And part of that is the information about the terrain. So one of the issues I started having is I would meet a girl who, say, went from having a street bike, which when you have a street bike, you go up and up and up in size. And so maybe if you felt confident on a street bike, you went a little larger because it gives you more stability. And then they decided to cross over to some dirt stuff. And so that concept of having a large CC engine was still sort of in their head. And so, somebody sold them an XR 400 or, something like that. And I'm over here on this 150 doing some pretty technical stuff. And if they wanted to come and ride with me, my first thing is like, well, honestly, I would just worry about you not having a good day on that bike. And could somebody ride that bike on the same terrain I am? Yeah, it's just what's the best fit for you? What are you going to have fun on? What are you less likely to get hurt on? And I did ride with a couple of, people who had some bikes like that. And if they've never seen truly technical terrain, they just really don't know what to imagine. And that was the other thing. If you've never seen it, you just don't even realize that it's there.
Right.
And it was hard for me because here in the Northeast, we don't have a lot of public land. So the bits of land that we were riding on belonged to people that we knew. And it's not really like some place that I could bring a girl that I met and say, well, come with us for the day, borrow this small bike so you can see what I'm talking about. I did that a few times, and then it got to a point where that's kind of really what spawned the event is how can I do this on a scale where I can accommodate more women and I'm not bringing everybody to this, piece of land that belongs to somebody who doesn't want, so many people on their land kind of thing. It's like I need to find the land and then, steer everybody the right way. But that's really how it started.
Yeah, no, I love that. And I want to touch on that, challenges of riding in an area where there's not a lot of public land. So we kind of talked about the starter bikes, and then you get to a point where maybe you want something a little different, or you want to get something more out of the bike. Maybe it's better suspension, a little bit snappier power, and that's kind of where you found yourself last year, right? So what's your feel? I mean, and you're riding the Beta 200 now. Tell me what that transition was like moving from the Honda 150 over to this Beta 200 two-stroke.
It was it was interesting because being on the Honda 150, I forget why, I think my search for the next bike spanned probably about 2 years. And I would say at the beginning of that 2 years, I probably wasn't really ready for the next full-size bike, but I thought I was. Um, so it was a blessing in disguise that it took me a couple years of kind of evaluating bikes and continuing to ride mine until I got to the point where I was practically trashing this bike. I mean, and that's, how I kind of think it should go in a sense. You're riding a bike until you're out riding it, and then you're really ready for something else. So the 150 did me good for a long time until almost every ride I was going faster, going harder, that if I did have a fall or something, it was just, really getting kind of banged up. And so it's not even just about the height of the tires or the size. It's, the materials, the balance of weight, all of that stuff. I just started to really have a hard time, and there was so much deflection in that smaller bike that I think it was exhausting me. And, it's again, a double-edged sword. It gave me a lot of skill. I think I developed a lot of core balance, but after a while, it really started to take it out of me,
Yeah, sometimes you're riding beyond the limits of what that bike was designed to do, and we're never going to do that on the bigger bikes. We're never,
right.
Well, almost never. Most of us will never outperform even the bike that you're on now. But on some of those starter bikes, you can get to that point. And you mentioned it was deflecting, and you were probably bottoming out suspension and hitting, the frame on different places because it's lower to the ground, and it's just made for a little bit less aggressive riding. And so then you transitioned out of that and had to get into a full frame bike, if you will, right?
Yeah, definitely. And it's funny, you talk about the lower ground clearance, and that's something I forgot about, but just the amount of times that even like the foot pegs or the skid plate would hit some kind of rock and it just stops you dead in your momentum, or it gives you a hit. It's like, I remember making that sound of like, ugh, like it's like getting hit, and that does take it out of you during the ride, it kind of screws up your momentum. I remember then moving up to a larger bike with the bigger tires and a better suspension, and then it's like, man, this is almost like cheating because you're not getting like hit with all those little things, So I do try to tell, women who are on these smaller bikes, don't try to outgrow them because you think that they look smaller, or, or if it's an ego thing, because in a lot of ways they're harder. And it's kind of like putting you through your paces. Because when you do start to outride that bike and you're ready for the next one, you're going to have the skills to ride the next one. And that was something I was also fortunate enough to have the right guidance. My husband's been pretty good about giving me the right guidance. Well, he's not pretty good. He's given me the perfect guidance with everything. So he did tell me in that search, just things I still needed to work on. Weight was a consideration. So if I was going to go to a two-stroke, which is what I wanted to try to save some weight, with the Honda, picking up 240 pounds, I think it is 240 pounds, a little bit top heavy, that really would exhaust me on a lot of things. I was looking to shave weight, and he was on a KTM 200 XCW. Shortly after that, Husky put out the TE 150. This was maybe 4 years ago, and that's that bike that you and I ended up talking about. It was really enticing for me to look at a bike that was maybe only 200 pounds. But he explained to me the difference between a 4-stroke and a 2-stroke, and how you really need to ride them wide open. And I'm a more sort of cautious, slow rider. Not even just cautious, like I enjoy it. I kind of enjoy like a slow, drip down logs. If people say I might like trials riding, I probably would. But so he said, okay, well, if you're going to move up to that bike, you need to work on getting up your speed. You need to work on, riding at a higher pace, because you're going to need that with the 2-stroke. So I spent maybe like another year working on my speed, trying to get my speed up, and working on a lot of things to prepare myself for that next bike. But to catch up on like what you were saying, is I reached out to you when I was in the middle of that, because Husky released that TE 150, and then KTM released the TE 150, the same kind of version, the 150 XCW. So then I was looking at that, trying to see the differences between them and trying to understand the tuning, because even those bikes, which, people typically say, oh, they're the same bike, but they're not the same bike. I mean, they're manufactured very similarly, but I'm sure they'll have a different way of being tuned. They have different features, different parts. And that's actually what you and I spoke about, was I was trying to see, could I expect that TE to maybe be a little more lug friendly than the KTM XCW? Or, I was really looking for a luggable two-stroke.
Yeah, and then that's kind of what led you more down the path of the Beta, right?
Yeah, and the Beta wasn't even on my radar. Just all of a sudden, actually, my husband saw our local bike shop. That they deal in everything, but they carry Beta. They posted a picture of it that they had in the shop, and he said, "Oh, what's this bike?" And so I did a search and I read a few reviews. I think on Enduro 21 and a couple other sites. There were maybe only 2 reviews out, but just the way that they described the bike sounded like it ticked every box of what I was looking for. And so it's funny because even though I hadn't test ridden one, something about it just felt like this is the bike. I went and looked at it, and standing there looking at it, I felt in my gut like this is the bike. And so I bought it. And sure enough, my first ride on it was seamlessly perfect. There was no, it was great. It was easy, and it was like not intimidating, but it also had the power. And, slowly I've transitioned from what I was used to on that CRF 150F to this Beta, and it's made me a better rider, so it's now teaching me to be a better rider with what it has to offer me. But it's been great.
Yeah, well, it's funny because I think about going from the Honda to the bike that you're on now, and it literally is, you're going from the Japanese Camry to the Italian Ferrari. You know what I mean? And so, and that's where those companies make those bikes. So I'm just saying it. And the other thing I love about the Beta, and I will hopefully ride one very soon, the dealership, I think, has it ready for me to go, but my finger is still broken. And so it's hard for me to get trucks in and out, or bikes in and out of the truck, but I'm going to go swap out. I've got a Beta 390 right now that I'll swap for this Beta 200. And I'm excited. The seat height on the Betas are a little bit lower. A lot of people don't know that generally speaking, it's about an inch lower than like a KTM or Husky, or even like a Kawasaki or Yamaha. And then now with Beta, you can get like a low boy kit on those things, and it's like 2 inches lower than normal. So now we're talking a bike that is set up from the factory 3 inches lower than some of these other big bikes, which is a huge thing, especially if your inseam is shorter. And a lot of women are right around your height.
I'm glad you mentioned that too, because that is a huge thing. And I've seen in the past couple of years, a lot of girls go out and get a full size bike and just lower it the most that it can. I know that there's some, stock lowering kits that give you 2 inches, maybe 3 inches. I didn't want to do that. I wanted to learn how to handle it. How do I word this? Again, I ride with a lot of guys, and the answer that I get to the things that I see as obstacles are, well, I can do it. Well, I can do it. And, we want, if we're going to talk about men versus women, we are different, but at the same time, if there's something that can physically be done, I want to try to do it if it's something that I should learn to do. So handling the height and weight, being able to dab my foot off the side instead of have my feet touch the ground. I wanted to make sure I had all of those skills first, and not mess with the bike's internal geometry, because like you said, they are factory designed to operate at their best the way that they come. And one of the things that I learned that I didn't know 2 years ago was really just the detail of swapping out the spring. So when I was sitting on the bike and realized it just felt so huge. It wasn't just the height factor. It was the fact that it didn't move when I sat on it.
Right.
That sounds like common sense, but if you're just starting out and you're not thinking about it, it's not the kind of thing that unless you sit down and talk to someone who's going to explain that to you. And that's what I did. And so I learned that, okay, swapping out the springs is going to give me that give and that sag that if you don't have that and the bike doesn't move when you sit on it, it feels like a crazy huge thing. It doesn't feel natural because there's no give with your body.
Yeah. You didn't weigh enough.
One factor.
You're too light.
I didn't weigh enough. Yeah. So those standard stock bikes that you go into a shop and sit on one and they feel like crazy, the sag changes everything. The give with the spring. So I knew I wanted to swap out the spring. I didn't want to mess with any sort of lowering kit, which, they do have one, but I didn't want to do that. But being that the seat height is naturally about an inch lower, and then I purchased a seat from Seat Concepts that had a little bit more of a scoop out, so that gave me another inch. So I think that puts the seat height at about 36-ish or so. for me, 35, 36. And then once the springs are kind of broken in, and to be honest, like now that I'm on it and it's pretty well broken in, it's not that much higher than my CRF 150. I mean, I can still touch the very, very tips of my toes down, but in most cases, you're kind of side saddle, 1 foot down, 1 foot over it. But once you get comfortable with that, it doesn't even matter. You're comfortable with it, and it's a routine that as a rider you need to. It's part of it that you need to learn, and it's like you need to get rid of that crutch in order to learn to ride that way. So, I definitely like to not encourage women to do massive lowering, but to work on their own skills instead. Because you look at a lot of motocross riders, feet can't even touch the ground.
Right.
I mean, and obviously this because the suspension is so tall, but
like if you look at Ricky Carmichael, he's like 5'8". Ryan Dungey 5'9". Ryan Villapoto 5'7". No, in fact, I think Carmichael's only 5'6". Ricky Carmichael. Yeah, and so and then I'll get people to say, well, it's a different discipline. How often do they have to put their feet down? And that's true. A motocross racer generally isn't dabbing a foot like a trail rider. But but the concept is still there, and it's something that I tell my boys and my daughters, hey, all you really need to do is put 1 foot down because you're going to tip one way or the other. So if you're tipping over, it doesn't help that you can touch with 2 feet. Now, that's easy for me to say because I'm 6 feet tall, but people say, well, you don't know what it's like. And it's true to a certain extent. But I love the fact that you're just saying, hey, let's work on our skills and let's work on our technique and let's figure this out. Yeah, and maybe get a lower seat. And that might be all that you need. Maybe you need to change the spring off your shock so that you can have enough sag so the bike will sag down properly under your weight, because it's supposed to come down 30% of the travel just with your weight sitting on the seat, right?
Yeah.
So we need to get the bike set up properly. Something else that I was really interested in talking to you about, because I live here on the West, I live in Utah, and in the West we have a lot of public land. And so I don't have to go to races or any event for me to be able to ride literally thousands of miles of single track. I will ride, I'll ride an area once or twice a year and I just move on to the next one. So I'm riding everywhere, all over Utah, all over Idaho, northern Arizona, and we're just overwhelmed with the amount of terrain that we can ride. In the eastern, and I feel like even probably east of the Mississippi, there's almost no public land. And so a lot of people have to get involved with these events, or they have to get involved with races, otherwise they're never going to ride. Can you talk about the challenges of living in a part of the country where there's very little public land?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's a huge challenge, first off, and but mostly it's a challenge to the people who maybe only want to ride recreationally, or who want to know what it's all about, or be interested in it. It's not that there isn't riding here. There's so much riding. It just really is, like you said, it's all through organized. It's almost all race. It's almost all race community or organized events. And so it's interesting to me because obviously when I first started, that wasn't really something that I was totally aware of. I mean, I knew, but I didn't feel it because I knew people who rode and I knew where they rode. And I kind of like compare it to like skateboarding back in the day when like kids would hear of an abandoned pool or a house or some feature, and like, it was kind of an underground thing. You'd hear about a spot that you could ride and you'd go hit it before it got taken away, kind of thing. And so there's a little bit of that going on where you meet somebody
are you a skater in your background? Were you a skater chick?
No, I've definitely tried to skateboard. I would not call myself a skater chick because I never got, but I was a snowboarder, and everybody I hung out with, that definitely the vibe.
I think we're about the same age, so I just wondered if you knew the term skater chick. That was a thing here.
Oh, I did, or skate Betty for sure. Which is more the chick who sits and watches. But no, and my husband was a skateboarder. We were both snowboarders, and so I'm definitely familiar with that too. And just for me, like that's something that I feel like is the same kind of deal. Like you're bound as a community because of that knowledge that you share, or even if you think about underground like punk rock or hardcore shows, like if you're outside of that scene, you don't, if you lose track of it, you're not in it anymore. It's when you kind of catch wind, or if you're going to the right record shop that happens to have a good flyer, or, something like that. So it has a lot more to do with people and community, which I think is a great thing. And so for me, it was just, how do I create a gateway to that community for people who don't know that it exists or are intimidated by it? Because, quite frankly, like you take the average girl and you show her a local hair scramble, and it's like, she's never just going to go there.
It's too intimidating. There's just so many riders, and they're so fast, and they're, everyone's pushing it so hard. That's intimidating.
And the format and how far out, and then, not to mention the fact that even if you wanted to get into it, okay, well, would you go without a bike? Okay, well, then you're going to want to get a bike. But if you get a bike, how do you get that bike around? Are you the kind of person who has a pickup truck or a trailer, or, so it really kind of comes with all of these issues. And there's no rental places, really. There's nowhere to like go and rent a bike. And so if you even sat down at the computer and tried to search for any of this, you're not finding anything. And I did that at the time before starting an event, just because I wanted to know for sure, like, okay, what is this like for somebody who isn't me, who has no idea, but sees this on TV and like wants to give it a try. If they were to sit down and try to search, dirt bike lessons or something, what comes up? There's like nothing. It's a really, really tricky, it's a tricky find. And part of that is also that, there's people in the industry who do this sort of thing who maybe aren't super tech savvy either. I've definitely started to meet people who do some lessons, but, maybe they're not coming up, in a Google search, or they do a lot by word of mouth. So it's just about bringing a little bit of that aspect to the pieces of industry that we have here, so that, they could come to life a little bit more. What am I trying to say? So when I first started meeting, different females who rode street bikes or what have you, and they knew that I rode dirt bikes, there were, plenty of them that would ask me, well, where can I go ride, or how do I get into this? And I really had no answer for them. And then finally one summer, a girl, the way she asked me, she said, can I please come to your house and ride a dirt bike? And she said, I'm not trying to invite myself, but is this something that we could do? And I said, you know what? I'm going to make it happen. Done. And so I organized maybe, 7 to 10 girls that I knew. And I said, hey, you've all expressed interest in this. Let's come over, we'll grill. I'll, start up the 2-3 bikes, and, and we'll do that. And so, we did this. And I even had an accomplished adventure rider who came. She knew how to ride, but she didn't know the ins and outs of starting, say a kickstart bike. So handling a choke, never done it. Kickstarting a bike, never did it. Just little things like that. And so it was really interesting to see these different riders who have ridden street, ridden adventure bikes, or haven't ridden anything, and how they handled it and how they reacted to it. And one of them was like a natural. I mean, she was back there, shredding, and I was like, that's cool. And another one, she's riding around and she yelled out, I can't stop smiling in my helmet.
I love it.
That for me was just such an amazing day. And that really kind of started it. But for that handful of girls, there's no other way, there's just really no other way that they would have found a place to go or a bike to ride. Doesn't happen.
Yeah, and that's what's so great about this event, even the one that you've got coming up this week. So tell us a little bit more about that for our listeners. Some of the people are going to catch this before, some of them are going to catch it afterwards. But what are the things that you're going to focus on? It's October 4th through the 6th. And what are you going to be doing? What are you going to be focusing on? Ladies only, right?
Well, yeah, ladies only once again. And this one is going to be a little more focused on motocross and techniques. So just to give a tiny bit of backstory, the reason my events are called Over and Out is because the summer event that I have is really more enduro and trail riding, but it's also dual sport. And I know that there's sort of a blurry line between those different categories, that the way that people talk about them. But you have trails that go through the woods that are maybe tighter, more technical. And then you have trails that are, say, farm roads, dirt roads, it's a dirt trail. It's flat and it's wide. And so for a girl who has like a WR250 with on-road, off-road tires versus a girl who has a KTM 200 XCW with full knobbies, they're set up maybe differently for different types of trails. And so I wanted to create one place where those two different types of riders, or whatever type of rider in the, any in between, if you want to say, okay, someone has a KLR 650 or a DRZ 400, depending on how comfortable they are with that bike. Okay, maybe they've ridden it on dirt roads. Do I want to put them on a technical woods trail when they're not expecting it? Not necessarily. So we created an event that had these options. And what I did is I guided everybody who signed up so that they could understand what their best terrain option was. And I did that by, really working hard to talk to everyone and understand what they were riding and what their comfort level was. And that's really how we started. And so that summer event repeated itself this past year, where we moved to a 2,200 acre property out in Tamaqua, Pennsylvania. And we did the same thing again. We had, dual sport rides that would go off the property and cover longer distance. And that's for, dual sports or enduros that are plated and have on-road, off-road tires. And then there's plenty of trails that are on site that are just marked woods trails. And that's for anybody and everybody with a non-plated bike with full knobbies. So we bring those different riders into one group experience, and they do different types of riding, but they get cross exposure. So already by the second year, I've seen girls who have gone from a dual sport bike to buying more of a trail bike, and vice versa. There were a couple girls who have trail bikes who heard about a dual sport ride we were doing, and they went out and got their licenses and did what they had to do to get their bikes plated because they wanted to do that ride. And so they did that for the first time. So it's pretty cool. We have girls kind of going both ways. And now the event that I'm holding this weekend, like I said, it's a smaller piece of property with a motocross track on it, like a very friendly, it could be beginner friendly, but also fun for an advanced rider on this track. And my thought for that really came from, I did like a training clinic with a bunch of girls that ride and who already ride confidently, ride in the woods, take home, make podiums. But in riding with them for an afternoon, I realized how little of like motocross or core technique they really had when it came to, clutch work, braking, all that sort of stuff. And I have a little bit more of that because my husband is a motocross racer. So when I started riding dirt, he really taught me a lot of these little things, when to sit, when to shift, when to downshift, how to rev up with the clutch. We're always working on some of these little things that add up. And I thought, it'd be really great to see some of these women who are doing so awesomely on dirt bikes and trail bikes come and try a track and really hone in these skills that they're maybe not always working on because they're always riding terrain that isn't repetitive. And it's funny because, again, I rode on a track with a couple of girls for the first time who had never been on one. They're accomplished riders. They're good riders. And we went around the track and they said, "Oh my God, that was my first time on a track." And I'm thinking, you're such a great rider. Like, I wonder what a track would also do for you. So I'm really excited for this. Like, there's like a handful of girls I can think of, and there's going to be a ton of girls that I've never even met coming to this thing. And I'm just super excited to see what they do and what they get out of riding on the track.
That is so cool. Now, have you sold out? I don't know how many slots you have open, but do you still have any open slots?
We do have open slots. Yeah. I didn't really set a cap on it because I just want to see where it landed, and we're in good shape. So, we have a pretty good crowd coming. Probably, we'll probably have around, let's say 100, 130, somewhere between 100 and 130
wow.
People attending. And there's still room. There's a couple others who want to get in there. Tickets are on sale until Wednesday, the 2nd. And then the event kicks off on Friday. Gates open at 11, and we go the whole weekend. Gates close on Sunday at 2. But it's been great. And we have a couple of different schools going on too. So a 6-hour intro school is happening on Friday, where you can rent the bike with the class. And then we also have Aaron Lampy, who is a pro motocross rider from New York State. He has a really, he has a great reputation as a trainer. He's coming down on Saturday and doing a couple of 3-hour clinics just for the ladies. And then we have a bunch of other fun activities too. Evening activities, raffle. It's gonna be a good time.
And you kept this ladies only. What was your? I mean, you just want to. Is that a security thing, or tell me exactly, like, is this women's night out? Like, why? Give us some other reasons why women would want to sign up for this. They may not be able to get to it this year, but give some other reasons why you think that women should sign up for this. Because I know you talked a lot in your Makeup to Mud, or not a lot. You talked a little bit about in the Makeup to Mud. It's nice to see a woman doing something. It's nice to see a woman do this because they have different body types and different body shapes. So was that a big part of the reason why you said, hey, this is going to be ladies only? Talk us through that a little bit.
Yeah, definitely. Because I'd say the first few years that I rode, and some of those really hard rides, I mean, we were doing every weekend, and it was me, my husband, and a group of 3 men putting in these 6-hour ride days that, when you're new and it's and it's frustrating, it's really hard. And it's hard to be around, I think men and women are just a little bit differently. They had, they really did have more strength and stamina than me. So to always feel kind of like the one who was not only just learning, but also isn't 6 feet tall and isn't, whatever. I wished a lot of that time that I just had another female who was at my level, that I could ride with to sort of evaluate and understand things better. And the couple of opportunities that I did have to ride with a female, it was nice just to see, I don't know. And for me, it was easier to see somebody and say, okay, I just watched them do it, so I know it's possible for me. There's no excuse. This isn't necessarily easier for them. It's all in technique. Which men would tell me too, say it's all in technique. It doesn't matter that I'm doing it versus you. I think in some ways I just needed to see it. And I also just it would have been nice to have a companion who was at my level. Yeah. So that I wasn't always the only one kind of straggling behind, at the time. And then, after I started meeting a few, we did like I said, I had that day at my house, and then I did a little trial event where I sort of put the feelers out a little wider. Like I found girls on Instagram nearby. There were girls who found me who I had never met before, but I said, well, let's all get together and ride. And everybody got such a payoff out of it. Just, I don't know what it is. Just seeing other women ride, being able to ride in a pack, you really truly feel like part of the pack. But you also learn, and I made another friend by doing that, who just riding with her, it was nice that she was the same level as me, because I say, I stand up more than her. She said, when I ride with you, it encourages me to stand up. She rode faster than me. And so I was like, yeah, I ride behind you. It encourages me to ride faster. And we're about the same size and give or take about the same skill level. And so it opens up that little bit of possibility, and, just makes for a better rider. And I mean, plus the fun of riding as a pack and sticking together and making sure everybody clears the same obstacles. There's just there's such a bonding thing to that. And it's so cool and so fun. So by now, having seen that actually come true for all the women who have attended, I mean, they've made friends, and by making friends, they've gone on to do other things together, like trips or try a race, or, get their, AMA cards and go do a race somewhere. It's helpful. And so, the keeping it all women's is really just because there really isn't anything else out there like it. There are events and lesson groups for kids. There's plenty for men. And I know not all women want to kind of come out on their own. They would love to stay with their family, but I think they also get something out of stretching their comfort zone. So we've had women, learn how to strap down their bikes themselves, learn how to haul the family toy hauler. So at home, the men are involved too. The men are with their wives or girlfriends or whatever it is, and helping them get set up, if that's the case. I mean, we have women who do it on their own anyway, but it's also nice to see the ones who don't, taking on that part of the education. So when they show up and roll through the gates, it's this is amazing. I can't believe you did this on your own. You learned how to strap your bike. You've hauled this, to see a girl roll in with this massive toy hauler and 6 bikes in it that all belong to her girlfriends. Mm-hmm. And that's pretty cool. Oh, that gives me chills.
That does. I love that image. So tell me, just kind of in conclusion here, a couple more questions for you. What is some advice that you would give to the men out there that are trying to get their wives or their girlfriends more involved in dirt bikes? Do you have some advice to say, hey, here's some pitfalls to avoid, or here's what women need from this? I mean, just because I'll admit, it's even being married 15 years, women and men speak a little bit different language. We relate to things on a totally different level. I'm reminded of this every day. So what tips or what tricks or what advice do you have for guys out there that are trying to get their wives or their girlfriends more involved in this sport?
I guess, and it's tough because it's different for everyone. But going off of things that I have been told by women who, or things that they have asked me, it's funny. I'll have women who have husbands or whatever, boyfriends who actively ride and race, and they maybe get treated like they can't handle it, or like they're going to be too scared or something like that, as if that's a permanent state of affairs. And I think that's part of it too. I think, men and women are very different. And if you address fear and things like that, I think a lot of times fear is presented as something that won't go away. And for women, they feel like the fear is too overwhelming. It's always, you're going to hurt yourself, or I'd love for women and maybe the men helping them to sort of tamp down on that fear and maybe think about it more as discomfort, because I think things can get a little bit hyped. So I think if men don't act like the women are just going to get hurt, but actually explain to them how, just how to ride. And I know, it takes a lot of nurturing. It takes a lot of time. Like I said, I put in these long days with the guys that I ride with, and they were awesome. The etiquette, they didn't, blow me out of the water. They went and somebody rode, sweep. Somebody rode in front of me, made sure I, was able to keep up and, mark the turn. And, that's just being, polite, common courtesy, stuff like that. But no one ever made me feel like I couldn't do something. In fact, it was the opposite. I always got encouragement of like, my son can do it, or, this person can do it. You can definitely do it. It's all technique. It's not your bike. It's not you. You can do it. And I don't think that that's the feedback that every female gets. I think some female, whether it's a joke too, and I think a lot of times men are joking and they like to kind of razz on a woman, but if she's already a little bit, stressed, frustrated, confused because it's all new, that can only really be taken as, additional criticism that sometimes doesn't help. So I just think kindness, and I think realistic, like a realistic approach. I had a girl show up to one event and she was very scared. She wouldn't even start her bike and get on it to bring it over to a tent that was like 100 yards away. She came and got me to get it. And in her mind, what she was so scared of was letting go of the clutch. And in her mind, she imagined this bike just shooting out from under her and taking off. And I just said to her, I had to make her realize that would not happen. And I had to show her why. And I had to show her that all she had to do, if she ever got nervous, was just pull that clutch in, that it was her friend, not her enemy. Don't be afraid of, you know what I mean? And I know that sounds a little bit silly, but there's all these little things that people will latch on to because they've envisioned it a certain way so many times, because it's been portrayed to them a certain way so many times. And this is where, some of that sports psychology, kind of comes into it, is making it realistic and not dramatic. This isn't going to, blow you away. This is going to be maybe a little bit tricky. Are you going to fall? Yeah, you're probably going to fall. Are you going to maybe bang something up one day? Yeah, you probably are, but you're going to get over it and you're going to get better. So I kind of like that. I like approaching it with like just this honest, straightforward, no drama kind of approach. And I think that is something that a lot of women appreciate, and the positivity too. They really, and it's amazing what some of these women can do. We had another woman show up last summer, never rode anything. She took a lesson, and by the second day, I mean, she was out on the trails, and the trails are nothing, I'm just so shocked that she made it out on the trails. She left the grass and she did great. She was another person who just knew she wanted to do it, and she came and did it for herself, and she was a natural. So sometimes you have those people, they just need the right setup and they need the right encouragement.
I love it. And the more we've talked about it, the more I can see the value in these events that you're putting on. I kind of wish that there was someone doing this on the West Coast, closer to me, and maybe there is, maybe I just need to do a little bit more research on this because I feel like my wife could certainly benefit from this, and I feel my wife would be, I think, a lot more comfortable learning some of this stuff from her peers for whatever reason, and a lot of it is probably my fault. Just sometimes men and women can act as like two ships passing in the night. And I feel like there would be less pressure for her to learn if she was learning from a group of women. And so I think there's a ton of value in this. I can't overstate that enough. I feel there's not enough women in our sport. I look at my demographics on YouTube. It gives some demographics, and then just on what am I trying to think? Instagram. And I look and I say, well, Google and Instagram think that there's far under 10% of my viewers identify themselves as women. Mm-hmm. And part of that is maybe just because I'm a man, but I think a big part of it is there's just not a lot of women in our sport. And I think there could be a lot more of them. And as much of a blessing as it has been in my life, I feel like there's a lot of women out there that could get that same type of fulfillment out of it. And you're helping to perpetuate that. And I think that's to be, encouraged, and it's to be applauded. So I love what you're doing.
Thank you. And I mean, I hope that if there are more women out there who are even thinking about it or curious, that they, step forward and look into it and really go for it, because it's worth it. I mean, it's such a fun sport. We wouldn't all be talking about it. There wouldn't be podcasts about it. It wouldn't be such a huge industry if it wasn't really, really amazing and fulfilling. And that's the part I like to drive home is, for me, it wasn't about being scared that kept me out of it. I just never heard of it. I had never been exposed to it. And from the moment I was exposed to it, it was like my brain lit up in ways that it hadn't since I was a kid. And I thought, I want to get good at this. This is something I want to get good at. And, here I am 8 years later, still trying to get good at it. But it's, at least to me, it's that worth it. So there might be, some women out there who just really didn't even know that this is something that would fulfill them so much. They haven't even thought about pursuing it, but hopefully they, maybe catch wind and have these ways of getting into the sport. And I would just hope that they know that it shouldn't be a matter of, fear keeping them out of it. Like that should never be the thing that keeps them out of it. Because it's completely doable. It's very possible. And when people go at their own pace and they educate themselves and they have the right equipment and all of that, it's totally doable. So it just takes a little work on the women's part, potentially, if they're not being reached by someone else, to start looking for some of that research, to do, doing a little bit of homework as well, or finding the person who will help them. If they're talking to a man who isn't being very helpful, well, maybe reach out to a stranger, or I've had, like I said, strangers reach out to me, and I'm happy to answer the emails or DMs that come through, just to give a little proper guidance,
Yeah, that's a perfect segue. How do people contact you if they've got more questions about what you're doing, or if they just want to, general questions? I'm a woman and I want a woman's perspective. How do they contact you?
So my online presence is Over and Out Moto. So my website is overandoutmoto.com, and on Instagram and Facebook, Instagram is at Over and Out Moto. Then having no moto on there was taken, so I had to add the moto. So that's really the official name. But I run it all really myself. I mean, there's a lot of people involved who work very hard in these events with me as well, but the communication is all me. So when people submit a question through the website, there is a contact us button form, or a DM through Instagram, or a message on the Facebook page. That's where I am. So always happy. And other women who are connected to our community too. I mean, they're all happy. So if you kind of join, we have a Facebook group, they're all happy to kind of chime in and connect and meet people. I mean, strangers they'll meet with each other to caravan to an event together, or to share a bike, or, something. So there's a lot of women out there in the off-road riding community who are totally willing to help and welcome in new riders. That's for sure.
I love it. I've just been perusing your website here as we've been talking, and kudos on what you're doing. Keep it up, and we'll have to chat again in the future as this thing grows and evolves. So I appreciate your time, and keep it up.
Yeah, thanks so much. I can't wait to hear what you think of that beta.
Yeah, I'm excited too. If I can get this pinky to start, I'm supposed to be wearing my splint. I'm not wearing it right now, but I've got 3 more weeks of a splint, and then I can start riding again. I can probably start riding in 2 weeks with just it taped to the other finger. But as soon as I can get out there on that, I'll start putting out some content on the old beta.
All right, awesome. Looking forward to it.
Okay, Kelly, have a good week. Good luck with this event that's coming up. Okay.
Thank you so much.
We'll talk
have a good week.
Bye.
Take care. Bye.
Just wanted to thank Kelly again for taking time to talk to us. If you've got questions about how to reach her, again, go to overandoutmoto.com. You can find her on Instagram. You can find her on Facebook with the under that handle, Over and Out Moto. Love what she's doing. I wish more people around the country would do something like this, maybe even on the West Coast, because I think there's demand for it. So I love the fact that is going on. Guys, if you like these podcasts, please remember to subscribe and share them with your friends. Please rate us on iTunes, rate us on Google, rate us on Stitcher, all those places. If you are giving ratings and reviews on these things, it makes it easier for other people to find them in the future. Going to have a ton more content, hopefully more content coming out. I'm organizing multiple interviews with various people across the industry, so there should be a lot of fun content that is interesting and engaging. So that's what it's got to be. Appreciate you guys, and we'll catch you in the next episode. Thanks.